Are we all in agreement that there are a lot of ethical decisions that 10, 15 years ago were not out there, and that because of advances in technology, we've got some serious dilemmas that our forefathers never ever had to face?
Yes.
The one point that I would get back to is last week or Tuesday we talked about the fact that this is a biblical ethics, Christian ethics class. So we're always going to be referring back to what is God's will. You know, does the Bible specifically have anything about in vitro fertilization? No, but does it have precepts about life and about the way we treat life? Absolutely. So as we look at some of these moral dilemmas, some of the things that we're going to be discussing, especially today, I want to make sure that we always come back to that point, the fact that we have got to use the Bible as God's standard. I also want to point out this. There are ethical situations which are exceptionally easy to make. And by that I mean you've got a situation where you look at it and you say, okay, that seems wrong if we do A. It seems right if we do B. Therefore, I'm going to do B because that seems right. That's not a big deal. Those are the kind of decisions, for instance, like abortion. We look at abortion and we say, abortion ends the life of somebody, therefore we're going to go this way. The problem comes in when you have what I would call a right situation. And by that I mean it's either right or wrong, meaning if you go down this path, that seems very right. But if you go down this path, that could also be right. Or likewise, if you go down this path, it could be wrong. If you go down this path, it could also be wrong. Where I want us to start with this class today is I want us to pick up with the topic of life. We defined life using the Bible last time. On the screen, you should be seeing a quote from Justice Harry Blackmun. He was on the court of the infamous Roe versus Wade case, and in his opinion, in that particular case, he made the comment, he said, we need not resolve the question of when life begins. So that is how he approached the whole topic of abortion. We talked a little bit last week about what does the Bible have to say regarding life. God recognizing life before birth. On the screen right here, you see what I consider to be somewhat useful. This is a definition of life chart that kind of gives you a feeling of when people begin to accept something as a life form. In other words, there are only two sources out there. That is the National Cancer Institute and Tabor's Encyclopedic Medical Dictionary that say it's got to be implantation. Webster's New World would say you got to have fertilization and implantation. All the other encyclopedias, all the other guides, all the other dictionaries, all the other medical associations recognize fertilization as life. Now, we take that and we start looking, for instance, in 1981, you've got a physician's geneticist testifying before the Senate Judicial Committee. Dr. McCarthy Demir, he said, the exact moment of the beginning of personhood and the whole human body is at the moment of conception. Dr. Lejeune, the father of modern genetics, he went on to say, to accept the fact that after fertilization has taken place, a new human has come into being is no longer a matter of taste or opinion. It is plain experimental evidence. Fetus Dozansky, he observed, he said, a human being begins its existence when a spermatozoan fertilizes a new egg cell. So let's go ahead and within our class, let's resolve this question of, all right, medically speaking, when does life occur? On the screen, you see a pretty rough schematic of an ovary, the fallopian tube, and then you can just barely see on the side there a uterus. You'll notice the ovary in this particular schematic, it's releasing an egg. And if you follow it up left to right, 3 cells up, you've got an egg cell that is being fertilized by a sperm. That then changes the stage to an embryo. You've got a 1-cell zygote. And what I want you to notice is all throughout the rest of the fallopian tube, this thing is growing and dividing, growing and dividing, growing and dividing. You've got a 2-cell, 4-cell, 8-cell morula stage, all the way to a blastocyst that still has not implanted. Now, if I take the position that life only begins at implantation, then what am I saying from the fertilized stage all the way to implantation? What is all of that?
Blah.
Blah, basically. Is it growing material? Would everybody in there agree with me that it is dividing, that we have active metabolism? Absolutely. Guys, anybody with an inkling of background in the biological sciences will tell you that's life. If you are actively metabolizing, you're dividing chromosomes, you're splitting DNA, you by definition have a living being. Now, whether or not it has a soul or not, that's the topic for another class. And in fact, we're going to probably talk some about ensoulment. When does God place the soul into a body? And in fact, if you guys want to write about that, that'd be a great topic. But the point I don't want you to miss right here is, medically speaking, scientifically speaking, can we say that is a living structure? And the answer is absolutely yes. So we can feel confident life begins at conception if the embryo is viewed to be a living being, which it is, and it is viewed to be human, which, my question is, all right, if that is not human, are we ready to say it's animal, mineral, or vegetable? Is the human embryo a person or a non-person? If one answers that it is a non-person, on what basis is the judgment made? Is there such thing as a non-person in the Bible? The problem comes in with this whole abortion debate. It comes in with primarily emotions. So, let's talk just for a moment. You've got a rhetoric of abortion discussions where you've got folks who are quick to label something pro-life, pro-choice. Be very, very careful in that. And I say that, obviously, I'm hoping everybody in that room is pro-life. But we need to understand that just because we're labeling people pro-life or pro-choice, that doesn't mean that those people are either anti-choice or anti-life. When we look at whole numbers, guys, on abortion, when we get just what I would call an empirical picture, we go to the CDC and we say, all right, what are the actual stats? Believe it or not, the numbers actually come down a little bit. If you look at the chart there at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice a pretty dramatic decline, especially starting in the year 1995. Can somebody tell me why that would be the case?
Knowledge?
Try again.
1995, you said?
What about war?
Possibly, but try again.
I would say the day after pill started then.
Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. We've got two things that came into play that dramatically reduced the number of what we would call conventional abortions. Wayne, if you've got the handout on RU486, go ahead and pass that out to him, please.
Okay.
Wayne is coming around. He is passing out a handout on RU486. I need everybody in that room to make sure you understand these are two totally different medications acting in two totally different ways. RU486 is actually an abortion pill. And by that I mean it is actually a pill that is given to you in a doctor's office that will cause you to actually expel the embryo from the womb. So there's bleeding going on. A lot of times ladies can actually see small pieces of body parts being expelled from their body. The morning after pill is totally different. The handout that he is giving you is specifically on this particular drug. It is a synthetic steroid. It's designed to interfere with the embryo's ability to adhere to the uterine lining. In other words, I'm pregnant. We got an embryo floating around in here. I take this, and suddenly it cannot implant, or if it's already implanted, it causes it to detach. So you got a woman who is given 3 200 milligram pills by mouth. The drug interferes with the flow of blood to the uterus. So eventually, even if that child has already attached to the uterus, because of a lack of blood flow, it is going to slough off, and there's going to be a spontaneous abortion. This is an office procedure because the lady will have cramps. She will bleed. This is a pretty serious, by all accounts, situation. Can a Christian in good conscience use R486?
No.
Absolutely not, because you are dealing with a situation where the embryo has already been created, therefore it's the destruction of human life. So as a preacher, as a counselor, anytime somebody's coming to you saying, hey, I want to take this particular abortion pill, can I take that? Well, you can take it. Obviously, you can do anything you wanted to because God created you with free will. But will that cause a separation between you and your relationship with God? Absolutely. Morning after pill is different. Morning after pill, also known as Plan B, is a pill that actually prevents or delays the release of an egg. So here's how this happens, and we're going to keep this on a somewhat a higher plane, so to speak, as we're talking about some of this stuff. You got a man and a woman who have sexual relations. For whatever reason, lady decides, you know what, I don't want to get pregnant. Or maybe it was unprotected sex, or maybe there was a failed birth control method. She goes to the pharmacist or goes to her doctor and says, I don't want to be pregnant. He prescribes Plan B. What Plan B is doing is it is preventing an egg from releasing from the ovary. So the sperm are still in her system for somewhere between 3 and 5 days, but there's no egg for them to fertilize. It's basically a way of kind of tricking the system to where ovulation doesn't happen until later on. Basically, this is a souped-up version of the birth control pill. It's a very concentrated version of the birth control pill. Tell me, what are the problems and the pluses of this one?
Well, you might catch it too late, and that Plan B could actually catch an embryo or a zygote.
Okay? So if she's already ovulated, if she's already released the egg, guys, this particular pill is not going to help at all. I mean, you can just chalk it up. If that egg is on its way, if you look on the screen where you see day 1, day 2, day 3, if that egg is already somewhere in that particular section, then you can go out and buy the booties, so to speak. What is the positive? Yeah, Plan C. What is the positive to this over RU486?
It doesn't kill anything, I wouldn't think.
Okay, if it's used to prevent ovulation, you haven't killed an embryo. What's a negative?
I think the biggest problem with this pill is why it's used. I mean, I don't really know if a married couple will say, oh man, we shouldn't have done that last night, and I'm going to take the pill now. I think the main reason it's being used is for, people who are out of wedlock, I guess. That's what my hesitation would be on the pill.
For immorality.
Okay? So one of the implications is obviously it allows for fornication without the consequences.
Right.
Okay? I would agree. The other thing that I want to throw out there, and we'll touch more on this as we go through the course, but guys, let's be honest with ourselves for a moment and ask, what is our view on children in the United States of America?
They're unwanted.
They're very much unwanted. You know how I know that? How many children do most people have? 2.2. The reason is, normally the number one reason given is finances. And yet, let me remind you what the Bible actually says. Psalm 127, starting in verse 3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is his reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. Guys, I don't honestly believe, even sometimes in the church, that we think children are a reward, that they are a heritage from the Lord. I think many people actually view them more as a burden. And so as such, here's what we're looking at. We got 49% of pregnancies that are statistically listed as being, quote, unintended. Meaning, I don't want the child. Meaning, I don't see that as a reward from God. Of those unintended pregnancies, now let's just round these numbers for a minute. That means 50% of the pregnancies on this planet were not intended. Of those 50%, another 50% end in abortion. So, realistically, if you do the numbers in your head, that means 25% of the pregnancies in the United States of America are ending in abortion because they're unintended pregnancies. Of the unintended pregnancies, they increase among poor women, they decrease among financially well-off folks, they increase among black and Hispanic women. I don't know that there is a specific reason why that is. And I don't think that really plays into what we're discussing here because, again, there is only one race, that's the human race, and all folks are created in the image and likeness of God. Here are the reasons they are given for abortion. First and foremost reason they say because of responsibility to others. In other words, that baby is going to cause me extra responsibility. You got 73% of the people that say, I can't afford the baby right now. 69% say that it would interfere with school or employment or ability to care for dependents. In other words, I got my life planned out and this would be a problem. 48% find themselves as being, they don't want to have a child because they'd be a single parent. Or because they are in a relationship problem with the father. And then finally, 38% have completed childbearing years in their mind, and so they think, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to go through diapers again, and therefore we're going to get rid of this. Questions, comments thus far?
Yeah, Brad?
Yeah.
Back to those two pills, is there any known long-term effects at all with either one of them on the individual? I mean, the woman that takes it?
They are both relatively new. That's why I was pointing out the 1995 dip. 1995, we started being able to do more in the realm of RU-486, and then Plan B came right behind that. So suddenly, instead of having to go to an abortion clinic, you can do this thing either in an office or through pills. Long-term effects, we don't know yet.
So
We don't know how it's going to affect future pregnancies.
Right. That's another great reason not to. Just because the FDA puts it out doesn't mean it's good. So.
Oh, no kidding. Look at FinFin and lots of other examples like that. Guys, tell me what you think when I say I don't believe the church necessarily has that we have the right approach at looking at children. Tell me some comments you've heard or things that would support that.
Well, can you repeat the question? What the church thinks?
Sure. If I am firmly of the belief that deep down within the church that we kind of hold society's view that we should only have 2 children and that realistically children are kind of more of a headache and a burden and we got to be financially responsible and we can't blah, 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 blah. I don't think within the church we necessarily view children as a reward from God.
The way people act, I've seen, like example, I said I was the youth minister back at Ukaipa, and I've seen elderly couples of the congregation look at the teenagers and like they can't stand them because maybe they're a little louder than normal or maybe they act different. And I have had I've had several females in my group come to my wife and I crying because they feel like they've been frowned upon by other people in the congregation. And that's teenager, and it's even worse at younger, I think.
Would you guys say that we are guilty of letting other people raise our children, taking care of our children?
Yes.
Brad? Yes.
From personal experience, visiting congregation from congregation to congregation, and taking my
Plethora.
my nation with me. The first thing we do, first thing a lot of times comes out of someone's mouth is, "Don't you know how that happens?"
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, hi, my name's John. By the way, what's your name? You know, I mean, you don't even get to that point yet. And
Right.
I know it's in jest at times, but I don't get offended. I feel sad for the individual who has the attitude of, that being my family, my large family. It's like, we need to have a change, paradigm change of sorts.
Right.
Not that everyone should, because not everybody can have a large family.
Right.
And I understand that. I mean, we could have had 2 kids, and God could have closed up Laura's womb, and that's it. And I would, but it's
Guys, I better not ever hear you mount a pulpit and say something to the effect of, "Whew, boy, we had a close one. We thought we were pregnant, but thank goodness we're not." Because if you say that from a pulpit, you just told your congregation deep down you really don't think children are a heritage from the Lord. That you don't think the fruit of the womb is his reward, because what you're saying is, glad we dodged that bullet. Man, we were close to having another one. What we need to be doing in our congregations is celebrating the fact that we're bringing more people up into Christian families. I don't think we necessarily need to, quote, outbreed them, but I would point out the Muslims are having 6 children to our 2.
Yep.
Anthony.
I think it's a selfish issue. We like our stuff, especially in this day and age. We like our stuff. We like our free time. We like our hobbies. And let's get through those first few years quick with 2-3 kids, and then let's move on and let's have fun.
Absolutely. Yep.
Brett?
John. Yep.
There are some, and let me say this, there are some legitimate fears that people have when it comes to thinking about having a child. If it's a family history of diseases, maybe you've had multiple or even just one miscarriage, I can't answer for those people, what they're going through. I don't have it, I haven't been in their shoes. So I've got to say that too, that there are those situations where people are fearful because of maybe their own life or the life of the child, their quality of the child's life that they're bringing into this world. So.
Absolutely, but there again, John, that is a person who has the proper attitude.
Right, exactly.
They're not viewing that child as a hindrance, but it's more out of love and concern for that child.
Yeah.
If I've got a particular genetic condition that is on both sides, and if we have a child, we're pretty sure that child is going to have this, do I want to go through genetic counseling and think about not doing that and adopting? Or, there's a big difference to that versus saying, well, we've got our two, I'd really like to have a beach house in Destin. So, guys, I'm going to tell you, you will, John can preach this sermon a lot better than I can. I've got 4 children, and when I take them with me, in fact, later today we'll be getting in the car, we'll drive to Oklahoma City. When we go places, we get the look. And, I've only got 4. But in today's time, they look at that and they're like, oh, man, wow, you guys got 4 children, what? And a lot of times there's some negative comments made about, how do you guys ever do anything? Don't you guys, y'all probably never get to go anywhere, and I'm thinking, my kids, first off, it's my duty to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. They travel better than most adults do. So, just get ready is what I guess I should warn you. Chuck.
Kind of going back to something that John said that people say in jest, but sex has been kind of demonized, even in the world and in the church. So, like, for me, it's kind of awkward when someone comes up to me and says, congratulations on the new baby. It's like saying, well, good job. That's just kind of awkward.
Right.
But it's been demonized.
It has. Well, and I think we have a duty to get back into the process of teaching our younger children that sex within a marriage is a great, wonderful, healthy thing. You guys are going to have the benefit of hearing some of that, because I've got a child who we're kind of right now ushering into that stage of his life, going from a very innocent stage to all of a sudden him realizing, hey, wait, boys and girls are different. What is that difference all about? And how does that involve me? I think in the past, basically what we've done is said, okay, you're a boy, you're a girl. When you hit 16, we'll talk about dating. And when you hit 18, we'll talk about marriage. Don't do anything. Don't you dare think about sex until you get married. And that's our counsel. That's it. And so we enter a marriage and we still think of it as bad and dirty and we shouldn't be doing this, when a much better approach is we teach our 10, 11, 12-year-olds that this is something that God gave us. It is phenomenal. It's wonderful. And when you get to be married, this is something that you're going to get to enjoy thanks to a loving God who created men and women. That is a totally different paradigm shift of looking at this than what we've done in the past, which is say, don't you dare do that. That's bad. That's dirty. That's wrong. And then on a wedding night, you've got brides who are feeling guilty. Okay, I don't know how you guys got me down that train, but we're going to get back on topic. All right, 2 principal moral considerations that we need to think about with abortion. Number 1, the moral status of the fetus. Is the fetus a person? Now, I'm using fetus here when me as a person would use the word infant or baby. Is the baby a person? At what stage in its development does it become a person? Is it conception? Is it first trimester? Is it birth? And we talked last week, or on Tuesday, about the fact that different groups have different times that they would assign personhood. The second moral consideration, ethically speaking, does the pregnant woman have the right to decide if she's going to carry the baby to term or not? All right, let's look at an important distinction that we got to make. As we consider this issue, it's important to distinguish two questions. Number one, is abortion morally wrong? And the other question is, should abortion be illegal? These are two distinct issues. They are not the same, guys. Because we all know there are some things that are legal that are immoral. They legalized sodomy in the state of Texas 3 years ago. Well, just because they legalized that, yeah, it's the Lawrence versus Texas sodomy case. Hey, man, don't act like Virginia's any better. We know
California
today.
who said it, and they're not.
California.
Thanks, Brad.
Oh, California.
I appreciate that.
Come on, Dustin. Seriously, I've got like 8 million slides on California.
I believe it. That's why I'm in Colorado.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Not everything that is
I'm on the
immoral is
same page.
necessarily illegal. We may, for example, want to say that being unfaithful.
I didn't say anything, man.
Hold on. We may say, for example, that being unfaithful to your spouse is immoral. But we may not want to see it made illegal. Two totally different terms. Here's what we need to look at. Central argument is this.
Brad?
Position one is that the fetus is an innocent person.
Brad, Quinn's got a question.
Yes. Okay.
I was just going to ask you, you do have these slides somewhere else, right, that I can get these? Because I'm getting none of them.
I'm going to upload them to my disk. I've already got the stuff we did on Tuesday up there.
About my notebook. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I'll upload these, probably be this weekend. I'll put them up there. Position two, it is morally wrong to end the life of an innocent person. Conclusion, therefore, it is morally wrong to end the life of a fetus. So here we've got the central argument against the process of abortion. And we've already talked about a biblical argument. What is the moral status of that fetus? Much of the debate in this whole thing basically centers around whether or not it is a person. If it is a person, then it's got rights that belong to persons, including the right to life. The concept of personhood, in other words, is that bridge that connects the fetus to the right to life. Somebody please tell me what the problem is in our judicial system with this right now. Come on. If I were to say the dude out in California that killed his wife, who was pregnant.
2 counts of murder.
Double murder.
What is our court system looking at doing?
Making it 1 count.
Actually, they're trying him for 2.
Well, that's what it should be, but you said there was something wrong with it, so.
So here's the problem, guys. If you've got a young lady, Emily, can I use you for this example?
Yes.
Okay. We'll say Emily is 7 months pregnant. She's walking down a sidewalk, and somebody hits her in a car because they're driving erratically. That person, according to our judicial system, can be charged with the crime of killing 2 people. Now, if Emily is walking down that exact same sidewalk on that exact same day, and right before that car gets to her, she walks into an abortion clinic, she can kill the life of one of those. 2 goes in, 1 comes out, she walks away scot-free. That's the problem right now that our court system has got, in that in one situation, that fetus is given personhood. But in another situation, it is not given personhood.
What is that called?
What is that called?
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is we're talking about the moral status of a fetus, whether or not it has personhood.
Give me the law, though.
I'm bringing it back up. How about that?
Okay.
John, you got a question, comment?
Where's that at in your state, as far as Tennessee, the personhood status amendment or whatever? I know Colorado.
My understanding is that you can be charged for 2 in Tennessee, because we actually had a lady that was killed on a downtown street. She was standing, I think, waiting on a bus, and a car pinned her up against a light pole, and it killed both of them. And because of that, they tried the person, and he was found guilty with 2.
Brad, what about if the baby's killed and the mother survives? They still charge it at one account?
It's state by state.
No, I mean in Tennessee, where you're coming from.
I think so. I'd have to look that one up, but I think even a as long as you can prove that you were pregnant and you lost the child due to that particular incident, I think they can charge you.
So basically, as long as it's not an accident, you can kill a baby.
Yeah, pretty much. If you do it accidentally, you're in trouble. But if you go into a clinic and do it purposefully, you're okay.
Hey, Brad.
Criteria of personhood. Are they conceived by humans? Do they have the same genetic structure that we do? Is there a physical resemblance? Is there presence of a soul? Are they viable? And will they have a future like ours? The problem is, guys, we have groups of people who are looking at each one of these criteria individually. So you got some groups that say, hey, until that baby is viable, until it can live outside the mommy, it's not a human. It's not personhood. Some religious organizations would say, hey, God hasn't yet put the soul in it, therefore it's just tissue. So we got to figure out from a society perspective how we're going to assign the condition of personhood. Two things for you to think about: necessary and sufficient conditions. A necessary condition is something which must be present for another thing to be possible. In other words, having your eyes open is a necessary condition for watching TV. A sufficient condition is something which, if present, guarantees that the other thing will occur. In other words, drinking a quart of whiskey is sufficient condition for being drunk. So now we take these two, necessary condition and a sufficient condition, and we look at the topic of personhood. Using that distinction, we can ask, what are the necessary conditions of personhood? What are the sufficient conditions of personhood? What would you guys say to those two?
What was the definition of sufficient conditions again?
Something which at present guarantees that the other thing will occur.
Well, necessary, would you say fertilization?
Okay. So are we all in agreement that from a Christian perspective, a necessary condition is simply conception?
Yes.
Okay. Sufficient condition. Here's where we start getting into this whole idea of, does it need to be implanted? Can it be in a test tube? Can it be in a beaker? Again, if we're taking the position that conception is all that is necessary, then again, the sufficient thing, it doesn't matter where it's at. It doesn't matter if it's in a tube, in the fallopian tube, in a beaker. As long as conception has taken place, that is sufficient to personhood. All right, let's look at an example of what I'm talking about. You got a lady. This is Jane English, beginning with Judith Jarvis Thompson. Jane English have argued, even if the fetus is a person, abortion may be morally justified. In other words, they would dispute the truth of the premise that it's wrong to end the life of a person. Why would they say that? You are awesome. Just had somebody hand me a Java chiller. Here's why they say that. That means if you guys thought I was like awake and ready to go now, you wait till about 30 minutes from now. Thompson offers an analogy. He says, she says, imagine that you were knocked unconscious. You were hooked up to a famous violinist who must depend on you for life support for the coming 9 months. You would be morally justified, they say, by unhooking yourself, even if it resulted in the death of the violinist. In other words, if you're knocked unconscious, you wake up and you realize they've hooked you up to a machine, and part of the deal is that machine is also keeping Joe Schmo, this violinist, alive. And you say, look, I don't want to be hooked up to the machine anymore. I don't need the machine. You're saying that morally you would be justified in taking yourself off the machine even if it resulted in the death of the violinist. By analogy, they say a pregnant woman is justified by unhooking herself from the fetus even if doing so results in the death of the fetus and even if the fetus is a person. This is called the Violinist Example. It has been used quite a bit to try to get people to accept the idea of abortion. This analogy has several limitations. In other words, it would only cover cases of rape. The violinist is not someone to whom one is related, even potentially. So then we've got somebody who came along, they looked at this analogy, and they said, okay, if we're going to fight for abortion, we've got to revise this a little bit. So we got Jane English who comes in, and this is what she said. Philosopher Jane English, she said, imagine that you go out at night knowing that you might be rendered unconscious and hooked up to the violinist. You would still, according to English, then be entitled to unhook yourself. In other words, it's not a situation of rape where you got knocked unconscious and you're hooked up. Now they're saying, well, you know, if you know that you may go out and you may sleep with somebody, and that may end up in having something hooked up in your womb, then you should still be entitled to unhook it yourself.
Why don't you make this?
They present all of this as rights. So let's look for just a minute. What does a woman possess that would entitle her to choose an abortion? Number one, Roe v. Wade, guys, what we talked about last week. And I may actually call her, Norma McCorvey, if we can figure out a good way to do a conference call where y'all can hear her. She's a very spicy woman. I'll go ahead and warn you that my hesitation in calling her is that she is a Cajun. She is not a Christian. Well, she considers herself a Christian, but her language is pretty spicy, and so I kind of hesitate putting her on a conference call with you guys. That case was ultimately not about the fetus. It was about rights privacy. Number two is a right to ownership of one's own body. Number three is a right to equal treatment. In other words, they say, hey, men can't get pregnant, so why should we be stuck out in the cold? Number four, right to self-determination. Women have the right to decide about their own futures. Basically, hey, I want to go to school. I didn't want this. I want to go start this job, etc. So these are the quote-unquote rights that they are pushing forth as a reason behind having an abortion. Feminist concerns about abortion, they see abortion issue within the context of history of oppression of women and a history of danger and death for women when abortion is illegal. We talked last week about the fact that Planned Parenthood plays on this in a huge way. By saying, look, if we don't do this, there's going to be millions of women who die in the gutter because abortion will be illegal and they'll still have it, but they'll be bleeding and dying and yada, yada, yada. This is kind of how they defend the position from a feminist point of view regarding abortion. Last but not least, abortion and racism, particularly within the African American communities, we see the call for abortion as being racist and a genocidal threat. Now, before we completely leave this topic, we at least got to talk about something we didn't even discuss last week. What about the rights of the dad? Should the father have any say at all in what happens to the child? Right now, you've got a situation where mothers actually give birth, the fathers don't. Society usually places primary responsibility on the mother. And in fact, fathers don't always know that they are fathers. And so we've got a societal situation that is taking everything that I've just given you, the feminist view, all of these different jigsaw piece puzzles, they put them all together, and even though the judicial system says, hey, if that woman is pregnant, you hit her with your car, that's 2 children, because of all of these other things that I've thrown at you, they still recognize the right to extinguish that life form. And so they are forced to say, in that situation, that is not a human. They do not grant it personhood. Somebody tell me a historical perspective of where people were not granted personhood.
Slavery.
Slavery is a great example. What's another one that changed literally the course of nations?
The Holocaust. I don't know if that's what you're asking for.
1936, German Supreme Court refused to recognize Jews living in Germany as persons in a legal sense. In other words, they had relegated them, guys, to a status basically of animals. And as such, we know what happened. They were treated like animals. I don't know how many of you guys have actually seen true footage from the Holocaust, but what they were doing with these people was beyond atrocious. They had mass burial graves where they would basically march the people in and then cover them up with dirt. A lot of them still living. They would march them up to the edge, shoot them with automatic rifles. They'd fall into this big hole, and as you can see from the screen, there was just a sea of them. All right, as you're thinking about personhood, I want to remind you a couple of things. Number one, Declaration of Independence holds the phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. U.S. Constitution says we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, meaning our offspring, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. In fact, the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution says, nor that any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then finally, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, he said, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That's why this topic that we're discussing is such a controversial one, guys, because it is clear in the law books that if something is granted personhood, it has rights. And so that is why you're going to see such a massive debate and such a massive campaign. When we talk about things like stem cell research, they don't really care about stem cell research so much as they care about, is that embryo going to be given the status of personhood? Because if it is, that is going to alter the abortion debate forever. So a lot of times when we're discussing in this class things that have to do with future technologies, that kind of thing, understand that a lot of people against it may not necessarily be against it. What they're against is giving an embryo the status of a person, because they know ultimately if that decision is made, it is going to reverse this court decision. Questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah.
What about ectopic pregnancies? Is it moral to really get rid of that baby that more than likely won't survive, and the mother won't either?
Okay, let me put up a slide so we can talk about it with... His question is, what about an ectopic pregnancy? Ectopic pregnancy is what happens if you've got an embryo, an egg that is fertilized by sperm in the fallopian tube. If you look on this particular slide where it says 8-cell stage, let's say that particular egg has reached the blastocyst stage right there where it says 8-cell stage. So in other words, this particular egg got fertilized way up close to the ovary. It traveled down. It's already at the blastocyst stage, still in the tube, and it implants in the tube. What can we do? Well, the clear answer is this. Number one, you can't do anything because that embryo is not going to live. It physically cannot live in the tube. There's never been a medical case ever of a fallopian tube delivery because the fallopian tube does not have the nutritional system set up like the uterus. So when an embryo implants in a fallopian tube, it may implant and grow a little bit. It may go on and reach another cell stage, but ultimately it's not going to set up a placenta. It's not going to have an umbilical cord. It can't grow. Now, knowing that it's not going to survive, that is going to make our decision making a whole lot easier. You go to the doctor, you say, hey, I think I'm pregnant, but I got a pain. He looks at you, does an ultrasound, and says, yep, you've got an ectopic pregnancy. We need to get rid of that. Well, we know it's not going to be able to survive. So you got one of two choices. You can allow them to flush that out, or you can basically leave it alone. It will grow and do one of two things. It will either spontaneously abort itself, or it will rupture the mother's fallopian tube, at which case then it's floating free in the abdomen. How would you counsel somebody in that stage, in that scenario? What do you think, Andrea? What would you say to somebody?
Well, if it does burst and then I don't know very much about this, so if it does burst and it's floating,
yep.
You can't deliver that baby anyway, it's going to kill the mom, right?
Could,
but
it could.
you can't deliver that baby.
No, there's no ectopic pregnancy. You can't. No. Until we get something like an artificial womb, the scenario that we're talking about right here is medically impossible. It is a situation where that growing tissue is not going to survive. It cannot survive. It doesn't have the nutrient supply to survive. So it's going to do one of two things. It'll spontaneously abort, or it's going to rupture through the tube. Chuck, what do you think?
Well, how long will it develop before it?
What do you mean by that?
Like, yeah, will it take months or will it take weeks?
Oh, no. You're talking days, weeks.
Okay.
They don't have a
because think about this. After roughly, and I'm using round numbers here, but after roughly 4 to 6 weeks, that embryo is far, far, far too big to physically be in a fallopian tube. Fallopian tube, guys, is realistically, it's about the size of 2 big pieces of spaghetti. So you can imagine once that stretches out to a point, you're done.
Okay. And that would cause sepsis and... Okay.
Right. It'd be a case where even though I would not enjoy making the call, the correct call would be to allow that woman to have that flushed out. Because that embryo cannot survive, and it could, in fact, kill her. Dustin.
They don't have a surgical procedure to move that embryo out of the fallopian tube?
No.
Oh, they should get on
Fallopian tube is so delicate. What do you say?
I said they should get on that.
The fallopian tube material itself is so... basically, the way, if I could demonstrate it to you guys, if I could show you one, it's basically like a vein, is the way you kind of would think of it. It is a tube that is very, very collapsible, very, very small. And if you can imagine, first off, trying to take a laparoscope in there, first you're probably going to damage that tube.
Right.
Irreparably damage that tube. Number 2, to try to grab an implanted embryo and not kill it is very, very hard. To try to then grab it, pull it off if it's already implanted, and then put it on something, we don't have a super glue that's going to hold it. There's not any kind of material. I mean, you would literally have to hold it on the uterus and hope that it's going to create a blood supply. And when I say hold it, I mean for a few days, you would have to just wait, sit there.
Right.
So, medically speaking, that is not viable right now.
So, Brad, is that
Yes.
still the situation you described where you flush that out? Is that still abortion?
That is called a D&C, is the medical term for it. There are cases where, for instance, Dean, let's say that your wife is pregnant and she starts spotting and you guys are nervous. You go in, you find out that she has done what's called a spontaneous abortion, or that the baby is no longer attached to the uterine wall, or that something like that has happened. And in what they have to do in those cases, they have to dilate and curvet, or dilate the cervix and flush out the uterus. It is technically, it's a different terminology than an abortion, but it's basically the same procedure.
Does it, would you say that affects one's relationship between that person and God?
No. No.
It was already doomed to be.
Because, for instance, in the case that I gave you, if your wife is spotting and she's spontaneously aborted, they've got to get that material out of her body, or she can get very, very, very sick. Or if your wife had an infant that occasionally they will spontaneously unattach, meaning the placenta will pull away, so that infant no longer has a blood supply.
So it's already dead.
Well, you've got an infant floating in her womb that, for all practical purposes, is dead, and or within so many minutes or hours will definitely be dead. I mean, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Depending on what stage it's at. And the reason why I say that is, you guys know, obviously, with amniotic fluid, it is swallowing the amniotic fluid. It's getting oxygen through the placenta. Depending on what growth stage it's at, all that kind of jazz, you've still got material in there that you can't just say, I'm a Christian, I'm not going to have an abortion. Well, you're not technically having an abortion, you're having a D&C. And it's a totally different procedure for a totally different reason, for a totally different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So does that separate you from God? No. There's a lot of things medically, and we're going to touch on a lot of these guys, that can you use it in a bad and evil way? Absolutely. but can you also use it in a beneficial way? Yeah. Okay, Dustin, you had a comment before we move on.
Yeah, what about if the mother does something to kill the baby inside of her, drugs or alcohol? Where would you put that category?
Where would I personally put it, or where does the law put it?
Yeah, I mean, what would you tell that mother if she came into your office and said, I messed up, had a few too many drinks, and
now the baby has fetal alcohol syndrome.
Or is dead, or it dies and it detaches from the womb.
Unfortunately, well, what I would say to her is, yeah, absolutely, you did mess up. God blessed you with a life, and you blew it. Now, does that mean you can't be forgiven? No, everybody can be forgiven, thankfully. That's a very hard thing for us to get our hands around, especially with the topic we're talking about right now, guys. This is one of those major things that it's hard for us to say, wow, how could God ever forgive that? But His forgiveness is bigger than we are.
Right.
So I would remind that person, number one, you can be forgiven, but number two, you need to show fruits of repentance. And by that, I mean, number one, you don't ever need to be doing this again. Number two, you probably need to set an example for the Christians in that congregation. We don't like to do that in the church, but that's a whole nother topic. All right. Let's talk about history for just a minute, because I want to put all of this in context. We are kind of, right now, we're transitioning between abortion and some fertility practices. But we got to get a little background. 1959. Daniele Petrucci, a research biologist at the University of Bologna in Italy, announced that he had fertilized a human egg outside the body for 59 days. Now, guys, remember I told you have active brain waves at day 40. That means this baby had a brain that was functioning. He claimed that the heartbeat was discernible, but destroyed it because it became deformed and large, a monstrosity. So 1959 was really, as far as if you go back and do the literature search, that was kind of our first introduction to artificial manipulation outside the body. 1966, a Russian scientist announced to an unsuspecting world that they had succeeded in keeping more than 250 human embryos alive in the laboratory setting for a period of up to 6 months. Now we've gone from 59 days to up to 6 months. We go to 1974. Douglas Beavis, University of Leeds, England, announced that he had succeeded in producing 3 infants through in vitro fertilization. However, he never actually produced them. This is one of those big scandals of science. This guy says he's the father of in vitro fertilization. That was 1974. He says the reason I didn't come forward with it is because I want the people to remain anonymous. Well, 4 years later, John and Leslie Brown, Great Britain, gave birth to a daughter named Louise, and she is on record as being the very first, what we would call, test tube baby. That's kind of a real quick history. And you can see, we go from basically 1959 to 1978, massive strides being made. You look at, for instance, the Burnhall Clinic in Cambridge, England. They have produced 1,295 children their first 10 years, basically a tenth of the world's test tube babies. So is this a big deal? Is it an ethical situation? Is it something that you as a up-and-coming preacher need to at least be well-versed in? Absolutely. It is something that's real. And guys, I don't know what it is that we are doing to the human body today. I don't know what chemical it is. I don't know what we're doing physically. but I do know infertility is increasing dramatically in the United States of America. More and more people are having trouble getting pregnant. And because of that, as preachers, you guys are going to be put on the spot more and more as couples sit in your office streaming tears down their face saying, all we really want is to love a child. All right. 4 places where genetic engineering can occur. You guys need to remember these. They can occur before conception, at conception, before birth or prenatally or postnatally. 4 areas where we can manipulate that life form. As you're looking at those 4 areas, there are 2 things that you need to know, and this is one of those things where systematically this is going to follow us in later discussions. There are 2 safeguards that the United States of America put into place regarding any experiment that was performed on humans. First and foremost, if you are performing an experiment on a human being, it's got to be under informed consent. There is not a medical facility in the world that is allowed to test something on you without first saying, we want to do this, would it be okay? And in fact, that's why I would recommend you, if you're ever going to the hospital, you better read the consent form because they may slide in a research study on the back of it. Number 2, it's got to be to the subject's benefit. Meaning they can't just experiment for experiment's sake. They have got to have reasonable knowledge that whatever they are doing to you is going to help you. Now, given that, let's look for just a few moments at this idea of before conception. What can be done before conception? First and foremost, we've got basically a scaling effect where they try to find the best eggs and the best sperm. Doctors actually pursue what might be called the survival of the fittest procedure, wherein they examine fertilized eggs, purposefully, carefully, select those that appear to be the healthiest, and then implant several of those into the uterus. Once that's been accomplished, gestation process underway, a new technology known as transabdominal selective reduction allows the doctor to go in and say, hey, look, we put a bunch of these in your womb. You got a bunch of them that are fertilized. What we're going to do is we're going to select out the ones that are best and reduce the others. In other words, kill the others.
Brad?
Yeah.
With this procedure, is it possible that they can match up and get, like, say if the parents want a certain child to look a certain way, can they actually, I want a blonde hair, blue-eyed kid, can they actually match up the eggs and try to get what they want?
It's called designer babies, and it is becoming more and more real. It started out as not being a big deal because it was primarily used in cases where a sibling needed a stem cell transplant. So, for instance, you got a child that grows up, it's got an X condition, it needs stem cells, mom has all these embryos created, they do genetic testing, they find out this one matches the sibling perfectly. So we implant that one in hopes that when that child grows up, it can donate stem cells and the first child's condition can be cured or put in remission. That sounded like it was somewhat beneficial. The problem is they can use that same genetic analysis and determine what color hair does that child have. Is this a boy or girl? Is it blue-eyed or green-eyed? Is it going to be big and play sports, or is it going to be intellectual and be a scholar? And so now we've actually got services where they can actually pay money for what we call designer babies, where if you're wanting to up your odds for XYZ, you can basically try to do that.
Okay,
It's not legal in all countries, but it is available.
Also, with the stem cell research, can't you potentially or actually help fight or cure certain diseases?
We're going to save that for the whole stem cell class.
Because that seems.
We're going to do a whole class on stem cells.
Okay. Sorry for doing it.
No, it's all right. That's a good question. What you're thinking about is right in line. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
Hey, Brad.
Yes, sir.
I don't know. I've been maybe because I'm a new Christian to the, only been a Christian 18 months. Do I not know a lot of stuff that the Lord says about all this stuff, or are we going to cover that, or? Because I hate that to sound, kind of silly question, but.
No, hey, first off, let me tell you this. No question is a silly question. Dan, the first.
I know what the Bible says about conception,
Okay.
But this outside the womb.
Right.
And all this stuff.
Okay, you were in class Tuesday when we talked about, we listed six verses that deal with how does God view life to begin. You remember we talked about Isaiah, Jeremiah, Psalm 139. We talked about Job. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay, and we talked about the fact that obviously God views God views life to begin before birth.
Okay.
So when I use the word embryo, in your mind that needs to translate, God views that as life.
Hmm.
So if I'm destroying that, in the eyes of God, I've committed an abomination.
Right.
Another verse for you to write down right now, just mentally think about it. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 and 17. These 6 things does the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him, a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood.
Okay. What about?
Okay.
I don't want to be too conservative. I don't know. I guess it's possible. But from what I've taken so far is conception. Sex is for married couples.
Absolutely.
And a blessing that out of there comes a childbirth.
Absolutely.
Now, where was I going with that? What I'm thinking is that is inside the mother, and so anything outside the mother should be, not right in God's eyes. That's what I was thinking this morning as I was.
Okay. Dan, let me give you the Cliff Note version of everything we're talking about today. Okay? See if this makes sense to you. God has given us a way to reproduce.
Right.
That works. Obviously, if we do that, we're good in His sight. God has also given us knowledge to be able to make some techniques that may be able to help the husband and the wife. By that I mean, let's say that a man's sperm count is low. We decide we're going to use modern technology, up his sperm count, or we're going to artificially inseminate to make sure that fertilization takes place. You still got husband's sperm, wife's egg, wife carrying the child.
Right.
You have not broke the bounds of marriage, and all you've basically done is taken advantage of modern technology. In those instances, you don't have a problem. It's when you start messing outside of that marriage unit and when you start messing with that embryo.
Okay.
That's when, as a Christian, I've got to have red flags popping up saying, wait a second, just because we can do this, should we be doing this?
Okay.
Because, guys, there's a whole lot out there that we can do. And I mean a whole lot of stuff. The reproductive field, infertility clinics, stuff is going like crazy right now. we're only going to touch just the hem of the garment when it comes to reproductive technologies. But the point is this: you're going to have members who attend your congregations. They got a smorgasbord of stuff that they can do, but that doesn't make it ethically right in the sight of God.
No, I feel more grounded now that you explain that way, because I had that call. I was like, man, that's because it just makes me feel better. Okay.
Good. All right, I want to hit one more slide before I let you guys go on break. So we're talking about the fact that beforehand you've got a situation where we can look at stuff, we can know before we implant, we can selectively reduce. Therefore, two of Darwinian evolution's most important concepts, that is, selection and survival of the fittest, are brought to bear in this unique reproductive procedure. You know, sad to say, but that's what's happening. Is if you're not the healthier embryo, you get slid over to the side and eventually frozen. And guys, that's tragic in my mind. The other area where you can have genetic counseling or genetic engineering before conception would be with genetic counseling. Those are the two areas. So you've got genetic counseling and you've got manipulation of, selecting out the best egg, best sperm, etc. When we come back from a break, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, okay, what about genetic engineering at conception? In other words, what about artificial insemination? What about in vitro fertilization? I put cloning here too, but we're going to save that for an upcoming class kind of by itself. But realize you can manipulate things before somebody conceives, and you can obviously manipulate things at conception. Questions or comments before I let you guys go?
We're good.
I'm gonna be a nice teacher and give you guys a full minute break before we go to our break. So y'all are free to get up, walk around, and get some caffeine injected.
Full minute, huh? 2 seconds.